Hi guys, I'm Amir, and just before I start, my Instagram name is in my little box. I am Amir Tayyib, and that shows more content. So unlike Greg, mine isn't about COVID. So mine's just a general talk on how one should focus on themselves. So yeah, so I want to take you guys on a journey. I want you to imagine that you're in one of the world's biggest slums, Dharavi, in Mumbai, and which spans across over about 520 acres, or let's say 260 full-size football pitches. And whilst you're in these slums, I want you to now realize that a mere 20 minutes or so away, you have Malabar Hill, where the house price starts from £5 million. So such a vast difference in wealth and living standards within such a short distance of each other. Only in India, home to not only some of the greatest disparities in wealth, but also home to Bollywood and some of the greatest minds that have actually walked the planet. A country so full of color, so full of vibrancy, so unique in its own way, and the country where I'm from. But I have to say, I've grown so used to the UK customs and the UK conveniences that I actually can't stay in India for more than 10 days or so. Now, when I was growing up, although I was actually brought up in quite a British manner and went to British schools and sort of associated myself with British customs, my parents made it a point to instill the Indian culture within me. Mainly because my mother herself only moved to India at the age of 19 before she got married, or only moved to London, sorry, from India at the age of 19 before she got married. And the way they would instill this culture that would be through sending me to Bombay during my summers as a teenager, and then they would allow me to spend time with my auntie and my grandfather, my mother's father. And over these summers, I grew particularly close to my grandfather, who is a very special person. He is someone who has supported me to date, but he's not only a special person to me, but a lot of people around him as well. But before I carry on, just to paint a picture, if you want to imagine my grandfather, he is basically the Indian-looking version of Nelson Mandela. So he's a very special person, and he's been through a lot as well. He has Parkinson's. He lost his wife at the age of 50, but he still maintains the will to try and live each day to the fullest. And he's taught me a lot. He's taught me, one of the main things he's taught me is that one should always assess themselves on their negatives rather than their positives, because that allows them to look into themselves and see where they can improve as an individual. But the main lesson he's taught me, as in the most important lesson he's taught me, is how to focus on myself and what makes me great, and how to focus on my achievements. I remember there was one particular summer, and we were driving back from my auntie's place, and it was in Bombay, and the sun was setting, and as we were driving back, I see this guy get into his bright red Ferrari. Now, just for a bit of context, I love cars. I love everything about cars. Maybe because I did a maths and physics degree, but I just love how these small engines are able to move these large metallic bodies at such different speeds. Anyway, so we're driving back, and I see this relatively muscular guy, rich-looking guy, step into his Ferrari. And as we're driving, I sort of see this guy, and I'm almost salivating. It's almost like The Pursuit of Happiness, in The Pursuit of Happiness, where Will Smith walks out the brokerage, and he sees the guy park up his red Porsche, and he goes, I have two questions. What do you do, and how do you do it? And that's exactly how I felt at that time. So anyways, I'm watching this guy, my smile is from ear to ear, and I see this guy get into his car and drive off, and the engine rev, and I say, wow, I wish I'm like him one day. I wish I'm as successful as him one day. And it was at that moment that my grandfather just looked at me. He just gave me this distinct look. He didn't say anything, but it was almost as if he was saying, you've got a lot to learn. Anyways, we get back to his house, and after dinner, he calls me over, and he had a very sort of distinct husky voice. He Amr, come over here. So sort of went away. He goes, what did you say in the car earlier today? And I was, just bear in mind that I was 15, was about 5 foot, and had a relationship with my PlayStation, so didn't really sort of have an idea as to what he was talking about. So I looked at him blankly and shrugged my shoulders. And then he goes, you said, wow, I wish I'm like him one day. And then he repeats it. And then he goes on to saying that, Amr, I must teach you something today, something very important. And he goes, in life, you will come across many different people from many different environments. You will come across people who have 10 pounds in their pocket, but will spend 100 pounds. You will come across people who have 100 pounds in their pocket, but will spend 10 pounds. But the key to growing and evolving as a human being is to actually focus on yourself and your achievements. So these were the words of wisdom from my grandfather. But having sort of looked at the current environment that we're in, this is, frankly speaking, quite true, because a lot of us in this day and age are always comparing. We're always comparing ourselves to other people. But this is quite dangerous and quite negative, because as a result of doing that, we are making ourselves feel bad and putting ourselves down, which actually causes us to make us feel bad about ourselves, which is not great. So my grandfather has taught me a lot, and he actually forms a very integral part of my life, and he forms a very integral part of my family. And my family are my biggest blessing. I'm honored to be called my dad's brother as much as his son. I'm my mother's best friend. I'm my sister's support and my brother's mentor. Don't worry, these aren't all self-acclaimed qualities. So now if we shift the focus from my grandfather to my brother, he's 18, lazy as anything, extremely intelligent, and has this innate ability to grasp anything within an instant, which, as amazing as it may sound, is also incredibly annoying. He went through a lot last year, especially through applying for university. And as a 17, 18-year-old, your concept on life is relatively vague. I mean, you are bombarded with all these questions. What university do I go to? What career do I pursue? What am I doing with my life? Yet you don't know the answer to these questions, yet you're still being required to make these decisions. So anyway, he was going through choosing a course for university, and I would see that he would get relatively confused, distressed, and sometimes quite angry about this. So I would see him, I would see his attitude and see him acting like this. And then, things went on, and he got more and more confused, more and more distressed. So I went into his room and I sort of spoke to him. I said, "Look, Hussein, what's going on? Why are you confused?" He didn't say much at first. And I sort of warmed up to the conversation a bit. I said, "No, you can tell me what's going on." And he goes, "Well, I'm confused. I don't know what course to study. I want to make a decision which bodes well with everybody. I want to do something which is good for my long-term career." So as he was saying this, he's getting worked up, he's getting confused, he's getting distressed, and I didn't say anything. But at that moment in time, I realized that this was the perfect opportunity to shed some advice onto my brother, similar to what my grandfather told me when I was 15, albeit in a different scenario. So I just look at him, and he's in the midst of, getting quite worked up, and I put my hands on his shoulders, and I shake him up, and I say, "Just focus on you." And at that time, he probably thought I was an absolute psycho. But a day passed on, and he comes back to me and he goes, Amir, that was probably one of the best things you could have done for me, because it allowed me to focus on what I want and to focus on what I feel is truly right for my own life. So from that, yes, we all need guidance from parents or from peers, but at the end of the day, we must listen to ourselves first. But we have to keep a balance as well. We cannot approach every situation looking at ourselves and putting ourselves first, because then that comes across as self-centered or selfish, which is quite unhealthy in its own right as well. But if we look at if I were to portray my personality as an example, now one of the things I love about my personality is I love to put other people before me, and seeing their happiness truly does give me happiness. But what I then slowly started to realize was that if I am not doing things which are conducive to my happiness and putting myself first in certain situations, then I'm never going to be able to fulfill my dreams. I'm always going to be living someone else's idea of how I should be living my life, which is not right. And furthermore, what I then realized as well is that in terms of my achievements, there is always going to be someone who's richer, someone who's smarter, someone who's better looking, someone who's younger than you. That's always going to be a reality of life. But what we must realize is that there will never ever be another you, and that is what truly makes you great as an individual. So as I finish off this call, I just want you to ask yourself one question. Think about one question throughout the course of the day or the next couple of weeks: is what makes me me? Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you very much, Amir.
Thank you.
I hope Greg is still here. If anyone has any questions for Greg or Amir, we'd love to hear from you. You can either put them in the chat function and I'll read them out, or if anybody has any questions they'd just like to ask, then do go ahead. Or if anyone's got anything else they'd like to add. Anne, go for it, Anne. I think you're muted.
Thanks, Alex. Oh, hi, everyone. Good morning from this very dull north of England. I'm actually in Lancashire, very miserable here this morning. I'm also the Executive Director of TIE UK North. I just wonder, Amir, if I could just ask you a question. I thought that was a very thought-provoking presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're such a nice young person. I thought, I took away from that quite a lot. If I just ask you, how important do you think it is in kind of building up confidence into a new way of working, really, and thinking for a young person? Is that quite difficult?
What do you mean?
In terms of, to start thinking a bit differently. I mean, we see within TIE quite a few young people that we mentor that kind of have an element of self-doubt about themselves, which means they don't kind of progress.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder what your thoughts are about trying to overcome, the self-doubt and maybe an image and presentation that you behave in a certain way. You mentioned, you like fast cars and you know, that sort of thing. I just wonder how you would switch that thinking.
I mean, that self-doubt, is something that is quite prevalent in this day and age, because we're all, like I said, we're all comparing ourselves to other people. And now, because of also social media as well, there's this sort of a category that we put ourselves, how we should look, how we should act, how we should behave. But I think the main thing is that all these things, we have to realize that they're just money-making devices. It's not reality, And in terms of our thinking as well, a lot of these environmental things that are happening, the way we think has to be conducive to our happiness, because if we start thinking about external factors and if we start stressing about things that are outside of our control, then we're actually not helping the situation. We're just putting ourselves at a disadvantage. We're putting our health at a disadvantage. We're putting our thinking capacity at a disadvantage. So there is actually no point in stressing or thinking constantly about something which is completely out of your control. So if for example, at this moment in time, mental health is a big issue when it comes to COVID. Now, okay, COVID is a nasty thing and it's changed a lot of our lives, but I hear a lot of conversations about people going, oh, when will it end? And, oh no, we're going to end on the lockdown's going to end on 2nd of December. We're going to have a vaccine by next spring, this and that. But the reality of it is no one has a clue. No one knows. So why are we spending all our energy and time thinking about something that we actually have no input in whatsoever? So from that point of view, I think you can change your thinking by just sort of saying, well, what do I have control over and what don't I have control over? And then move forwards that way.
Lovely, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to go to Sunil now. He's got a question. If you would like to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Alex. Not so much a question, but just a comment or a take that I thought after listening to Amir's excellent take itself. So I was just thinking that, simply put, every time you think you want something, you need to ask yourself whether you really need it. So I think want and need are the keywords here, I think, in my mind. So what you want is unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
What you need is limited.
Sure.
So, for example, if you stick to our needs, then we will feel rich, actually. And when you feel rich, I think it's time to give. So Mahatma Gandhi very famously said that there is enough in the world for the need of everybody, but not enough in the world for the greed of anybody. So to add to the two keywords, need and want, I think the third keyword would be give. And what's more, when you give, it gives you happiness. So, I mean, you cracked it, So that was my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think need and want is also that's also a big topic. But I mean, obviously, we as human beings, we are greedy individuals, and we do look at things we want. But we first look at the things we need and we prioritize that. But we should also look at fulfilling things that we want, because that in itself will give us our own happiness. For example, like I said, one of my biggest passions is cars. I love fast cars. Now, I don't need a fast car, but I want it. And that is also an aspect of adding to my happiness as well. So I think it's a balance that you have to achieve. And like you said, giving as well. Now, for some people, giving it's not within them. There's nothing wrong in that. They just don't. There are some very, very rich businessmen out there who are not philanthropic at all. And there are some not so rich businessmen who are very philanthropic. So it all depends as to what you want to do as an individual as well. So adding to your comment, which is very right in its own way, I think it's all about achieving a balance between the three things as well.
Thank you very much to both of you. Does anyone else have any questions for either Greg or Amir? Christine, lovely.
Myself, I'm Chris Kelly. I'm with Thai UK North. I just had another question for Amir, actually. I'm involved in event management, interested in your hotel background. I wondered how you dealt with, obviously, the devastation across the hotel industry, and how you managed to stay positive during the times that have been so uncertain for you in that industry.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So yeah, I used to be a banker. I used to be an investment banker. Then I moved over to family business, and my dad's on this call actually as well. So yeah, I mean, like I said, hospitality is one of the most affected industries. And at first, I think both my dad and I were sort of feeling quite victimized by the whole thing. It was a lot of things towards hospitality, and they were forcing hospitality to shut down, to try and reduce the spread. But what we then realized, and what both my dad and I discussed, is that we're in the situation. We can't, by shouting and screaming, getting stressed, getting angry, it's not going to help it. You know, by screaming at the TV when Boris is speaking, it's not going to change Boris Johnson's decision on closing down pubs and hotels and restaurants. So I think what we started to do is we started to actually figure out, well, we have our main business is rooms and food, but how can we diversify as a way of making more money? Because we were in a situation and we had to make more money. That was the reality of it. So what we started to do is I started to look at our base business and then speak to as many different sales managers and see, well, how can we diversify our revenue stream? How can we maybe make new contacts? Because what we also realize is that regardless of whatever time we are in, people are always going to need rooms, and people are always going to need accommodation. So what we actually started to do was we started to reach out to our local MPs, the council, different sales managers, and we started to get some contracts through, which actually took us through the first lockdown. This lockdown is a bit more difficult. This lockdown is just a bit more of we just have to be a bit more ruthless with our costings and things like that, because this one is more unprecedented, I would say. But the first one, you just have to diversify. You just have to try and diversify as much as you can, and then just sort of manage your business and cash flow accordingly, and manage your lifestyle accordingly as well, just to get through that period in time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the talk. It's really interesting, and Greg's too.
Thank you.
Can I just come in and give you 2 minutes of my experiences? I ran a company in the travel business, and it was called ebookers.com. And we had 3 or 4 very traumatic experiences, not like this lockdown, because this is a long period, but we had the internet bust, because we were an internet company, and we had the internet bust, and our valuations fell right like a stone to the bottom, and thus that impaired our ability to raise money, etc. That was first. Then the second was 9/11, which when the 2 planes went into the Twin Towers, and I think we had to pay out nearly £40 million in refunds. And you know, we just didn't have, we were just floating on credit, should we say. And that went on for 4 or 5 days. Then we had SARS, which was the avian flu virus. And then we had the tsunami in Asia. And we were a long haul specialist. So all these things at that time, you just feel you're going to be inundated and you'll have to close shop. But what happened with the Twin Towers was that within 3 or 4 months, we had such a huge boost in travel because a lot of pent-up demand was there as they couldn't or didn't want to travel. And so they came and in droves. And of course, the online companies benefited the most. And the same thing happened with all the others. So I would suggest this is very long drawn out. And I look at the Spanish flu a century ago, which had 5 different peaks and this looks something like that. You've got 2 or 3 already. But when things start, and if people can hold on, things are going to get really good. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you. No, I think that's right, Dinesh. I think that's very true. But I think the other thing is, well, if we try and predict what's going to happen, then we're just going to go nowhere. So we just kind of have to be in a situation where this is never going to end, and we have to deal with it, and we have to figure out how to make money in this new environment. That's just the reality of it.
Well, one of the things, Amir, was that, for example, I was talking to Harsh Sethi, who's a director of Thai London now, and I said, "You got 17 restaurants. What are you doing?" And he said he immediately, because he's under 45 million pounds of turnover, immediately went to the bank, and the government is giving 5 million pounds up to £5 million. He took all 5 million, I think it's interest free or whatever it is. And he got himself shored up. Then he went to all the landlords and said, okay, we've got to reduce the rent, you know, otherwise we're not closing down, etc., etc. So, and no one wanted to them to close down, so they all reduced their rent. And as long as you can last, that's the main thing.
Mhm.
Get some money and last.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dinesh. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Greg.
I think Sheena has one last
Oh,
question.
Sheena. Yes, sorry, Sheena.
No worries, Alex. Thank you. First, I thought, Amir, that was a really insightful and thought-provoking talk. So thank you very much for taking the time. I guess you talked a lot about the importance of focusing on yourself and kind of looking inwards, and you know, in terms of kind of that positivity and confidence that comes with, you know, not comparing yourself to others. I think, you know, one of the clear kind of, you know, challenges of the current climate in terms of just, you know, the huge amount of adversity and, you know, threat to livelihoods a lot of people are facing. I guess it's quite hard to be so kind of insular and inward looking, and I think a lot of people have found solace in the value of community during this time. Could you kind of share your thoughts in terms of the relative importance between kind of, you know, when are the right times to rely on yourself and your own kind of inward sense of purpose and strength, compared to kind of, you know, then actually kind of drawing on community to kind of help tackle adversity and stay positive?
Thanks. Thanks for the curveball, Sheena. Yeah, I mean, sort of like you said, it is a balance. It is a balanced thing, and we, as I said in my talk, as much as we are, I mean, everybody on this call, we're all intelligent people. We all know what we want, and there's nothing wrong about asking someone who you trust, you know, what do I do in this situation? But I think what we also have to remember that in every situation, if we look into ourselves, we have the answer, but it's just about A, finding that answer, and B, dealing with that answer, because it might not be the easiest thing to confront at that moment in time. So, you know, you could, for example, let's say you're particularly angry with someone. You don't have to deal with a certain situation. Let's say your boss is not treating you well at all. Now, most individuals would know what to do at that certain period in time, but they just don't want to do it, right? So then they go and ask for advice and things like that. So I think it's a balance between obviously understanding in yourself that this is the way I think is right to approach the situation, and as opposed to other people going, I would do it this, I would do this, I would do this. And it's mainly an amalgamation of a few thoughts, but at the end of the day, you have to realize that you are that person who's approaching that situation. So if you are not confident in what you're doing, and if you are going off what someone else is saying, then you're never going to get the desired outcome of that situation in terms of what you want. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to add anything? Okay, I'll thank everybody then. Thank you to everybody for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. I think it was all really interesting. Thank you, Greg, so much for speaking and giving us some good news for once coming out of COVID. And Amir as well, thank you very much. I think everyone's feeling sort of inspired, feel a little bit more positive and have more faith in themselves. So thank you so much for joining, and hopefully we'll be able to join our next webinar, which we'll be scheduling and planning for soon.
Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.